Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first of a series of educational-driven webinars during 2023 that Carrick is bringing to all our offices across Africa and, of course, all our clients and prospective clients from North, South, East, West, African continent, where we do business. My name is Fred van Niekerk, and joining me today are three panelists, Tess, John, and Lisa, who represent Henley and Partners, and I'll introduce them and why they are here talking to our clients today a bit later. The attendance register for this webinar has been quite humbling. We've set new records for both registration and attendance, and a lot of that I think comes down to the topic of parents across Africa wanting to know more about the options available to them when it comes to international education and tertiary education for their children. So wherever you've dialed in from today, you're not alone. It seems to be a concern for parents all across our continent. Just to give you some insight, we've got people registering from Botswana, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Zambia, Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Namibia, Mozambique, Congo, Mauritius, Lesotho, and Angola. And what's been extraordinary with this registration is that more than half of you specifically put personal questions to us in the panel that you were hoping we could answer for you today, and I trust we will. I've had an honor, if you'd like, of speaking to a lot of clients directly through our offices and through Africa in Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Mauritius. And when it comes to sharing stories of parenthood, myself being a parent myself, there's always three questions that come to bear. The first is, how do I prepare my children? How do I make sure that they are adequately prepared to go and make the most of this opportunity? The second is, where do I start? What do I practically have to do as a parent to not only get my child prepared, but ultimately have a successful application to the correct institution? But when it comes to my line of work with Carrick specifically, the question generally centers around, how do I get my finances in order to ensure that I can finance this opportunity for my children? And all too often, clients start too late. If I had a penny for every time a client or a parent has told me, Fred, if only I had met you or one of your representatives 5 years ago. International tertiary education for your children is very important. But preparation financially for it needs to start today. But as we sort out the financial consequence of opening this opportunity for your children, the second and third question come to bear. How do I prepare my children? And how do I decide on the correct course or school or university? And that is where Carrick, the financial advisory firm, find our partnerships with people like Henley and Partners invaluable. Henley and Partners Education Division focus and specialize specifically in assisting our clients in understanding, one, how to prepare your children, and two, how to make the best decisions for them. With no further ado, John Milne, thank you for being here with us today, and we look forward to what you have to say.
Thank you very much, Fred, and good afternoon to all of you. It's a great pleasure to be on this session talking about education globally and the options that are available, as well as how families can start the process straight away in preparing their children for the best opportunities, and there are so many out there. Both Tess and I are delighted to be joining the session today, and just by way of introduction, both Tess and I are from international education backgrounds. Personally, I have spent 25 plus years working in international schools, either as a head or as a principal, and worked very closely with universities around the world as well. So I'm delighted to be able to share my knowledge and my insight with your clients and your community today, and hopefully it will be the start of a very exciting journey for all of us. In terms of setting the context for global education, it's no surprise that since the pandemic 2.5 years ago, there's been a significant upheaval in the global education world. And possibly the biggest factor for us as education consultants has been the increased number of high net worth individuals and ultra high net worth families who have come to the conclusion that they need to be very sure of their options, not just options in terms of them as a family, but options for their children in terms of their stability of education and their continuity of education. Many of us globally have seen our children struggle and suffer because of the disruption. So if we're able to plan ahead, that's critical and crucial. And we've seen many families looking to secure their children's education in the future. And of course, access to high quality, world-class education is paramount for any globally minded family. Indeed, one of the families that we've worked with recently actually said to me, our children are our most precious asset in the world, and providing them with the best international schooling and university options is the greatest gift we can give to them. And it's one of the best investments we as parents can make. And they're absolutely right.
Yes.
For parents and for families choosing international schools and universities, it means that their child can learn in English, immerse themselves amongst international peers, follow globally respected curriculums, and work towards internationally recognized and world-class qualifications in preparation, not just for university, but also for their careers. So it's an incredibly valuable investment. In terms of some of the trends that we've seen, certainly because there are far more families around the world looking for the best international schools and for the best universities in different countries, there's been a tremendous flight to quality. So initially, everybody wants their son or their daughter to go to the best school or to the best university. And so we're seeing a lot of movement by families to countries such as the US and to Canada, the UK, Europe, and Australia and New Zealand, which are typically seen as the global education hotspots. As a consequence of that, you will find that the best international schools and the best universities are seeing an increase in admissions, and obviously competition is becoming incredibly fierce. So it's critical that any family seriously considering the best options for their children need to start that planning process early. And as Fred said, today is the day that you really should be thinking about what are the options and what does that potentially look like. Many international families are feeling dislocated right now, and so it's really important to take control of your children's education. And through Tess and myself, who are former educators, we can commit to you that we are hugely passionate about children. That's why we got into education. We have very strong links with schools and universities around the world. So unlike an agent, it's very important to choose who you decide to guide you through this process very carefully. And today we'll delve into that detail and demonstrate the competitive benefits that exist for you and for your children going forward in international education. So I'm now going to hand over to Tess, who's going to talk a little bit about why international education is so valuable. So over to you, Tess.
Thank you, John. Right, here we go. So it's very lovely to be here and to be talking to you about such an important topic that is your child's education. And thank you very much for all the... Sorry, that's my watch talking to me. Thank you for all the questions that you sent through, and John and I will, and Fred will try to answer as many as possible while we're going through and at the end. But international education gives your child a gateway to a global market. We live in a global world, as you're probably very well aware, and to expose your child to an international education where they mix with different nationalities, different cultures, different experiences, and of course will grow a global network, is all something that is vitally important for children as they get older and head toward their careers. One of the things that we found that was very interesting is that for many African families, there's a real need to consider international education because of the restriction on numbers in universities. For instance, in South Africa, you can see on the screen, the data here shows clearly that there were nearly 1 million applicants for only 67.5 roughly thousand places. That's not enough. And as John said, the competition now for university is rife, and for the best universities, you really need to start planning in advance. And we'll be talking about that. But there are real benefits to consider when you're not only thinking about university, but really thinking about the schools that you send your children to. Because I know that obviously you are all from all over Africa, but if I give you the example of the NSC, which is the South African curriculum, there are certain universities in the UK that don't recognise it. So if you, for instance, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial and UCL don't recognise that qualification. Now, the good thing is if you know that already, then you can think in advance and try and look at or find schools which teach the Cambridge curriculum, which will then allow your children to access these institutions if they didn't, or they wouldn't have been able to. So planning in advance for this sort of thing is absolutely essential, and the knowledge of how it works can really help. I want to show you a slide which is very interesting. If I can just make that go forward. There we go. Oh, no. Yes, there we go. Sorry. So I know it keeps on going the wrong way. So this is a very interesting piece of research that came out very recently from study.eu, which clearly demonstrates the numbers of African CEOs who have studied abroad. So 65% of all CEOs in Africa have had an international education. In another piece of data, 100% of CEOs from Africa have degrees of some nature. The majority are masters and bachelors, a small number of doctorates, but 100%, and the only other country that can demonstrate that is India. Everyone else, there are less degrees delivered. So there's a real culture for learning, which I find absolutely impressive. So international education will open doors and will enable your children to have a better chance of really hitting higher echelons. There's lots of research on this. Now, if we carry on and have a look at how to choose the right educational establishment, John's going to talk through this, and we're going to look first at schools, and we'll spend some time talking about how to do this and what you should be thinking about. John.
Thank you, Tess. And as you say, choosing an international school or schooling or university for a child is, I think, in my opinion, a little bit like giving them a superpower. You're really opening doors in the future. You're really broadening their mind, introducing them to new people, to new ideas, to new cultures, and to new experiences. And I think the two things that I really love about thinking around which school and which university is the best option for a child is thinking, what are they good at the moment, and in what way will the school I choose really enable them to really extend themselves, whether it's academically or musically or in a sporting way. Then secondly, what's the ethos of the school? In what way is it going to expose my son or my daughter to new experiences that they've never had before? Because we don't know that they're talented, or we don't know that they're hugely successful in an area if they've never experienced it before. So those are the sort of two forces that I would recommend parents really think about. What does my child need? What's going to enable them? And what would I like them to be exposed to? And of course, looking at the list in front of us, there are a whole range of other indicators that are really important when deciding which type of school in particular should my child be part of as they prepare for the next stage in their life. And in terms of curriculum, there are, generally speaking, in terms of global universities, two major curriculums that universities around the world, whether it's the US or Australia or the UK or Europe, would consider to be the gold standard. And that's typically the UK model, which is GCSEs up to the age of year 11 or grade 10, and IB, the International Baccalaureate, which many international schools would follow, which finishes at the ages of 17 and 18 with the IB examinations. But prior to that, the curriculum for IB in preparation is called the MYP, the Middle Years Programme, and the PYP, the Primary Years Programme. So although there are lots of different educational curriculums and systems in international schools, as long as students and parents are choosing either a combination of the UK model, which leads to GCSEs, and A-levels, which is called the English National Curriculum or the British National Curriculum, or they're choosing the IB route, then they're in a really good place in terms of preparation for keeping options open at all the major universities around the world. There is the Cambridge Education qualification as well, which is also a very well recognized curriculum, but those are the two main ones really, GCSE and A-level and IB. In terms of entry requirements, clearly the more selective and the more academically able the school is, the entry requirements are going to be much tougher. And I know, Tess, you're going to talk about our entrance assessment, the HAPA, which will give families an ideal opportunity internationally to get a glimpse of where their children sit academically in global terms. But ultimately, it's really important to understand, where is your child in terms of their academic potential? What are they like as individuals, and what are their interests? Because there are schools and universities around the world for all types of children. And so understanding what it is that you want, what your child is capable of, and then matching that to the entry requirements of the school is really, really important. There's no point in applying to some of the most selective schools internationally if it's not the right environment for your child, or academically they're not capable of surviving in that school. You get one chance to give your child the best education possible, and placing them in the wrong school can have significant downsides to their future educational experience, because if they're unhappy or they're struggling to keep up academically, it really does have an impact on their morale and their well-being. So understanding the entry requirements for any international school is really, really important. The good news is there are probably far more high-quality, world-class international schools around the world than there are highly selective academic schools. So there are great schools around the world where typically, as long as you want the best education, you want your child to get into some of the best universities around the world, there are some fabulous schools in Europe, in the UK, and in the US and Canada and Australia, where you can guarantee that if you follow the entry requirements and the process and you're supported in the right way, your child will get in, they will achieve their maximum potential, and they will go on to be hugely successful. And this is really important for families who have perhaps more than one child going to a school. Not all schools suit all 3 or 4 children in a family. So choosing the right school is really, really important, and understanding the entry requirements is critical. Admission rates, again, understanding the nature of the school is really, really important, and that flows out of entry requirements. If the admission rates is quite low, then clearly it's very selective and very competitive. It's really important to know, will all my children get in, or will actually my only child have a good chance of getting in? And if they don't, what are my fallback plans? What's my fail-safe? So again, that's the sort of thing that you should be considering, and where experts like ourselves can really advise and guide on having a plan B and a plan C, because your child might be hugely capable, hugely academically successful, but actually there are a lot of children in the world who are like that. And so even though they're suited to an institution, it doesn't mean that they will automatically get in there. In terms of lead time, again, it does vary. Most schools, I would say, in terms of getting into the best schools, would probably need somewhere between 12 to 16 months in terms of preparation time. Slightly different for universities in different parts of the world, but most competitive schools around the world would require you to register your interest in that school at least 14 to 16 months out from the actual admissions date. That gives you time then to prepare your child for any admissions applications, any personal statements, any interviews, or any assessments that they might need to take. Again, that's the sort of thing that we can advise and guide on. Nationality quotas, unlike universities who will have quotas, although they won't publish them, schools typically don't have nationality quotas. They may have for certain countries one eye on making sure that one nationality doesn't predominate in a particular school. But generally speaking, schools are very inclusive, they're very open, and they have a very wide-ranging selection policy and admissions policy around nationality quotas. So that's less of an issue for schools and perhaps more of an issue for universities. And we'll look at that slightly later when we come on to universities. Extracurricular activities. This is really, really important because we do focus in education a lot on academic pedigree and the quality of the teaching and learning and the quality of the examination results that children get in schools. But actually, for me, the really important part of international schooling is the extra, the holistic part that your student or your child is going to enjoy whilst they're in their schooling setting. And it's really important that you choose a school, wherever that might be, where there is tremendous opportunity in sport, there's wonderful opportunity in music and in art and in dance and in drama and in all the other activities that you would like to see your children get involved in. And so understanding what's on offer for your child within that school. Because believe it or not, academic performance is only one strand when it comes to character development and achieving your potential. It's all the other experiences, all the other challenges, all the other confidence that you get from participating in a wide range of activities that grow you as a person, grow your confidence, that allow you then to be academically successful at the end of the day. So choosing a school that offers a very varied and wide range of opportunities is critical in choosing international school for your child. Many international schools also allow for specialization. So again, if you've got a particularly talented child in music or in sport or in any other aspect of what it is that they're doing, then choosing a school and choosing which country to go to is again very, very important. I know that there are lots of students, let's say in the Middle East, where for their child they want to go to a school where there's the offer of polo. A lot of African families are also looking for great opportunities within sport. And many European families are looking for opportunities for the children to follow their passion in sustainability. So it really pays to do the research in terms of what is the school offering, because those are the additional activities that help grow character, build personality, and ultimately allow you to gain confidence. In terms of special educational needs support, I know that there were some questions posed before this webinar around their children, clients and their children, and would there be support either for learning difficulties or physical disabilities? Well, the great news is that in many countries, not just for schools, but particularly for schools, but certainly also universities, the provision for children with dyslexia or autism or dyscalculia or dyspraxia or physical difficulties, the opportunities are vast. There are schools that are incredibly inclusive, they're very, very high quality, and they do allow children of all abilities and all potentials to be in the same environment as everyone else. So again, if you do have a child, a son or a daughter who you are not confident would thrive in a particular international school setting, then don't be put off. There are definitely schools out there to help. And in terms finally of destinations, there are many wonderful destinations. As I mentioned at the beginning, probably the global educational hotspots are considered to be New Zealand and Australia, the US, Canada, the UK and Europe. And if you were to just concentrate on those particular areas, then you'd be exposing your children to some fantastic options. But equally in the Middle East, there is a growing number of world-class international schools, and having myself worked in Southeast Asia, again, certainly within the American International Schools Network and the British International Schools Network, fantastic opportunities abound. So hopefully that gives you a sense of the sorts of things you should be looking for when choosing a school for your child. And I'm just going to hand back to Tess now, who's going to talk a little bit more about the universities and some of the rankings that are out there. So over to you, Tess.
Thanks, John. Actually, that leads me quite well, because the destinations, yes, where the schools are, but also when you're looking at schools, you can always find out where their students go with relation to universities. So, you know, the better schools publish with great fanfare their successes every year. So it's always a good thing to have a look at where the students go, because it gives you a very clear picture of their success stories. And again, as John was talking about, the importance of extracurricular activities to develop character and awareness and interest. For instance, when you're applying for students who may be interested in American universities, which are very, very different to UK, for instance, universities, where the universities really take into account the character of the student, what the student is interested in, how can they bring something more to the student body of the universities. And of course, the Ivy Leagues, for those who are particularly ambitious and are really interested, a large majority of, for instance, UK students that were taken into Ivies, I think out of the 97 English students taken, 68 were taken as sportsmen and women. So there's a real benefit to the Ivies are a sporting group of universities. So if you want, you know, there's a real need to think and plan ahead. I mean, I think both John and I will probably become very boring and repeat that often. And as Fred, you were saying, you know, start today. It really is a question. Start today, do your research. Anyway, let's have a look at some of the rankings. Now, I wanted to talk about rankings because they can be quite scary. Now, can I make this move? Yes.
There we go.
Thank you. They can be interesting. They're a really good resource for parents and for children to have a look and see where the best universities are. And you can, I'll let you read through this, but it demonstrates where the best universities in the world are. However, rankings will only give you a certain part of the university success. It's really important, if you're somebody who's interested in rankings and looking at the place of a university, to remember that they may not look at each different course, or they will take into account one element of what the university delivers. And there are different types of rankings. You've got QS World, which are very well regarded, but you've also got the Times Higher Educational World rankings. And if you compare the universities in different rankings, you see they may not be in exactly the same place. And it's because they may have a look at different elements, different courses, which can be quite confusing. So I think the most important thing when looking for universities is actually very similar to what John was saying for the schools. It's essential, and there were lots of questions about, you know, how do we decide, where do we find universities, where do we start? And I think making sure that your child is in the best university for them, following the best course possible for them, is essential. And you need to consider the environment that the university offers. Is it a campus? Is it a city university? Is it rural? Is it, you know, there are so many elements that can be considered to ensure that your child will thrive and be happy there. Because if they are somebody who is really keen on being involved in debating and sports and all the many things they can do, then trying to find universities that offer those particular elements, those particular resources, extracurricular activities, is a really good thing. And there are so many universities in the world. Having an idea of where you want to go can help enormously. Now, we're not talking too much about residency and citizenship by investment here. However, sure. when John was talking about planning in advance, one of the things, and the fact that there are no, the nationality quotas don't exist too much in schools. Some schools do them, but not that many. However, the universities, although they don't publish them, some of them probably do. And I'm just going to give you an example of MIT, which is #1 ranked here. And MIT, if I'm going to read from my data. So there was for the acceptance rates for the class of 26, it shows that 4.97% of US citizens and permanent residents were given places, while only 1.42% of international students were accepted.
Okay.
So what that means is that there is a real difference. So for anyone, if they are thinking going forward of potentially getting residency or citizenship elsewhere, it can actually really impact what happens to your child. People were asking about European universities. Well, if a university in Europe, if you're a citizen, you can go everywhere throughout the Schengen area and you'll pay domestic fees. If you're an international family or an international student, you pay international fees, and around the world they're different. The international fees are always more expensive than the fees for the domestic students. And there are some European countries that don't charge at all. So there are lots of things to know about how and where to go to find out more about university. So another thing I was going to mention, because there were tons and tons of questions about scholarships. Now, I will talk about this in a fairly high level way because there is an awful lot that can be said, but the good news is there are scholarships out there. What I can potentially do is to leave some links which will take you to websites that talk about these, but there are specific scholarships available for African students wanting to study abroad. So I can sort of give some more information about that afterwards. So one of them, I don't know if any of you have heard of this, but MasterCard have a great scholarship. So I can put that in. I don't know, Fred, is that possible to do that? Is this being shared afterwards? Can I share some links to websites where people could have a look?
Yeah, absolutely, it is, and we'll speak to Simone and include a link like that. Absolutely.
Okay, because it's such a vast subject and it's such a personal thing. So each student will have their own, where they're wanting to go, what sort of course they're wanting to do, their own family. So it's a huge thing to talk about. So I think the best thing is that we send out a couple of links that will help families look at scholarships. But the answer is yes, sure. There are scholarships. And if we consider, for anyone considering American universities, that's quite an interesting one because they have different types of scholarships as well. You can consider there are need-based aid scholarships, but the majority of those are for US applicants. There are merit-based scholarships. Now that is something that can be considered. There are athletic scholarships. So there are various scholarship programs available. It's just a question. It's really just a question of doing your homework and talking to people who can help you with that. So let's move on. And I'm sure if people have questions, they can ask us afterwards. Now, we are going to now talk a little bit about the HAPA, the Henley Academic Profiling Assessment. John, I've been talking a lot. I was just wondering, do you fancy talking a little bit more about the HAPA, yes, and then I can talk through the report?
Yes, absolutely. So Henley Academic Profiling Assessment is very bespoke to Henley and Partners. It's an internationally recognized and standardized assessment and evaluation of a child's academic potential for young people between the ages of 6 to 16. And as I mentioned at the beginning, so many families are feeling dislocated in terms of their child's education. And although they might be happy where their children are at the moment, they're often looking at what the options might be in the future. But of course, the first question that you think to yourself is, will my child be good enough? Will they fit in? Will they succeed? And that's very difficult to gauge. Obviously, if they're a very outgoing, personable, engaging young person, then chances are they're going to do fabulously well wherever they might be. But we really want to make decisions as families based on anecdote and data. And this is where the Henley Academic Profiling Assessment comes in. It's a standardized assessment taken online in the comfort of your own home, and a child can take assessments in English and in maths, in verbal reasoning and in non-verbal reasoning. And individually those scores, as well as the cumulative score that they get, gives us a great indicator as to where your child sits relative to international academic standards. And there are very few, if any, assessments that can do this with confidence. The Henley Academic Profiling Assessment is a test that is standardized against UK standards. So it is quite specialized, but the UK is seen as one of the top education hotspots and the gold standard in global terms alongside the US. And so with a great deal of confidence, the outcomes from this assessment can be used to inform families which schools and ultimately which universities are the best for their child. And that's really, really important. And as you can imagine, post-pandemic, we've had many families take up this HAPA assessment because the one thing they do know is that their child will probably do well because they're confident. But where they will do well is a different matter. And so the HAPA has really allowed them and us as consultants to talk in great detail about where their strengths are academically and where their weaknesses are. And where there are strengths, that really helps us pinpoint which type of school and in which country they should consider. And where there are weaknesses, it really gives us a targeted opportunity to put tutors in place or to provide support, or if there's need for an additional diagnosis, we can do that. But the HAPA has transformed so many families in the last 2 years because suddenly families are able to look at their child and their academic potential and with confidence make informed, data-driven decisions along with what the family's wishes are to make sure that their child is going into the right school for them. And I can say with confidence that the success rate has been almost, if not 100%, because it really does make sure that you match the child to the best educational setting. And this is specific to Henley and Partners. So Tess is now going to talk a little bit about the detail and the data that you get and how we use it. But it's a really great opportunity for international families to get to know their child, to understand where is the best for them.
Absolutely, yeah. So what you can see in front of you here is the report that you'll get once your child has done this assessment. And you have, there's a big number on the left-hand side, the 77th percentile rank. And you may think, oh no, my child is 77th. No, actually not at all. If you look at the bell curve on the right-hand side, it's quite small, but 77th places this particular candidate above average, because you can draw down and you'll see that it sits right, that the child sits right on the right. So that's great. And underneath that, you can see the different scores, the standardized scores for each subject. And the child who's taken the test, their result is in the dark grey, and the national average is in the grey, pale grey. So you can see clearly this child is well above average in all of these areas and is particularly strong in non-verbal reasoning. And then where this assessment becomes so valuable is that, oh, go back up again, down again. There we go. Sorry, I'm not good at this. Is where it breaks up each subject into a subskill. So you can see instantaneously that this child, the majority of these subjects, is doing absolutely fine. Verbal, non-verbal, 100% success. However, in English and maths, you can see on the left of the central line, there are a few areas, fractions being one of them. In maths is an area where this particular child is struggling. So this is when John was saying, you know, we then work with the parents to identify if they already have tutors for their child in place, then we can say, and they can talk to the tutor and say, look, here we go, this is where my child is struggling right now, so can we work on this? And so it gives so much detail into the child's actual ability here. And then we can put a plan in place with the family to help work with them, and they can then take another assessment a year later. We would never recommend they do more than once a year, but it can really, really help us guide. And we had a child, one of our family's children is 15 and wanted to try to get into Oxford in the UK, and we said, well, let's do the HAPA first, and we were just crossing our fingers and hoping that she would have the academic ability. She did. She was right up at the top, so that was a happy conversation. Brilliant. So that's a HAPA, something that's really well worth doing, and we advise every family to go through that process. So how do you find the right your school or university? Now, this is a little bit of advice from John, I think, about placement services. We're going to go through this very quickly because I'm aware of the time sort of running away from us already. But what should you know about using people who work with school placement, John?
Yeah, thanks, Tess. I think we're all aware in the international community that there are education agents in country who claim to have fantastic knowledge and fantastic contacts within schools and universities, particularly universities internationally. But one of the key questions you should ask them is, when was the last time they visited one of the universities or one of the schools that they are recommending to you? And I can guarantee you the answer will stun them into silence, because most of these agents are processing families and they're processing children because it's about getting the children into the school that is the best for their profit margin, not the best for their child. And that's why working with individuals like Tess and myself, who are rooted in education, who understand the importance of a child going into the best setting for them, because they'll be happy and they'll flourish and they'll perform well within a school. And also because we're recognized as educators by schools and universities, it gives you a competitive benefit because they'll talk to us in the first instance because they trust us. And because of our experience, we often know the admissions directors in many of the international schools and also lots of the universities. So be very wary of agents, because again, very few of them know a huge amount about the schools and universities that they're recommending, and even fewer of them have actually visited those settings. So how can they possibly make a judgment call about your child or your family if they don't know where it is that they're sending them to? So make sure that when you talk to agents, that your child and your family is at the heart of their decision-making process, and not something that they simply fob off to you and say, oh, we've had lots of children go there, or it's got a fantastic reputation. Actually, try to understand, how do they know that? And when was the last time they validated that? Yes. Use experts, plan in advance. We deal with lots of families who come to us with about 4 months notice saying we want to get into a particular school or a particular university. It's so competitive now, but with proper planning, 12, 18 months out, it is eminently possible for your child to get into a great school or a great university. So really do take Fred's advice and start thinking about planning right now. And I'm not selling financial services or wealth management. I'm telling you from a school's perspective that we pay to be ahead of the curve. And in terms of how we work with families, we always talk to families in the first instance with a no obligations free conversation, just to understand what it is that they're looking for. We would then try to onboard that family and understand a little bit more detail about what their interests are and what their vision is and what their journey is. And depending on whether it's for a school or for a university, we offer a wraparound service. So we'll do the actual initial long listing of schools and universities, the short listing, we'll complete the application forms, we'll prepare the child for any entrance exams, any personal statements, any interviews that they have to give. We can even accompany families to the school or to the university if that's what they want us to do. And included in our services is obviously a HAPA, which provides detailed information about the academic potential of your child or your children. And as we'll talk about in brief terms in the case studies coming up, if families do want concierge services, they want support for their children whilst they're at school or university in an international setting, we can provide a wide range of concierge services to help with that as well.
Yeah. Let's talk about case studies, because that's a very
sorry, yes, can I suggest in the name of time, because I knew there was so much to say about this because we're going to push time. Can I suggest we focus on the university case study only?
Sure. Let's go on the university. So for those interested,
one back. There we go.
There we go. So this is a case study of a Nigerian family who had 4 children of different ages who wanted to go to university. One of the things that is important to know is that we work with experts who focus on certain, geographical areas of university. So David is our specialist who works in the UK, North America, and Europe, and he had with us initial conversations with the family, and the eldest children weren't 100% sure where they wanted to go, but decided to go to the UK, which he helped them with. He worked with them, identified the right foundation courses in London where they thrived. But throughout that year, they were considering, is this actually where I want to go? And they decided not to. So they started working with David to prepare their applications, and they're both now successfully at Loyola Marymount University. The 2 younger children, I think, having seen their elder siblings go through the process, wanted to get into US universities. Now, US universities have a much longer preparation time than UK and European universities, for instance. So a good 2 years, if possible, to get this child ready for application. And he started working with them during the summer and successfully placed them in MIT, which is exceptionally competitive, and New York University Stern School of Business. And, we keep on contact with the families. They're very happy with how the children have been placed, and they're all thriving. Very quick.
That's a stunning story. And Tess and John, thank you very, very, very much for sharing all that information with us. But what we've certainly made very clear is that there's no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to this. What I can certainly report back from the coalface, as I said, having the honor of sitting down with parents right across Africa, discussing their wishes and their dreams for their children, I won't be surprised if you get a number of interested parties engaging with you post this webinar to start the process of understanding what can be done practically to get their children prepared best possible to use these opportunities internationally. But as I said right at the beginning of this webinar, look, we get to have wonderful conversations with our clients, but we also have to have some very, very tough conversations with our clients. And all too often, it's if we'd only known. All too often, and in practice, it's deciding which one of my 3 children can I send due to the lack of funding. Funding is the biggest hurdle stopping people from achieving their goals for their children in accessing international education. And while the lead time, while the preparation time on the practical educational side might only be 2 or 3 or 4 years in the extreme, financial planning towards affording this opportunity for your children generally is a 7, 10, 15-year commitment. Unfortunately, we don't live with residency that will give us discounted access to these universities, or free, as you mentioned, in some European countries. In general, just to put some figures behind this, your average costing for university fees across Europe and the UK are anything between 20 up to 40, averaging out at about £26,000 per year. But of course, the child needs to live there, drive there, eat there. So in general, you're looking at your living costs doubling your expenditure per year. So it is very commonplace for us to see African parents at this stage having to fit bills between £40,000 to £50,000 per year to unlock this opportunity for the children. Now, yes, we do have some wonderful, fortunate people across Africa who can afford that out of their pockets. But in most cases, the majority of cases, this is something that needs a very specific plan put to it, something that we specialize in specifically with our clients. But this was only the first of a number of webinars we'll be launching over this year. We're going to be having webinars about property ownership, about African residents owning properties and becoming international property landlords. We're going to be talking about African residents and how they can secure financial futures into their retirement that can buy them a future of comfort and dignity without having the risks that we uniquely have in Africa of governance and inflation and currency depreciation. But also, we're going to be covering a very unique topic, and we'll be seeing Henley and Partners again when it comes to citizenship programs. Lisa, you've been very patient all day. If you can give us 2 minutes on exactly what citizenship programs would be now.
Thank you, Fred, and a big thank you to Carrick for having Henley and Partners present today. So for those of you who don't know us, a brief background: Henley and Partners traditionally are citizenship and residence by investment specialists. So we assist, we're a global company, we've got 35 offices around the globe. We're able to assist our global clients with obtaining a second residence or citizenship. You know, every client has different needs. We're a consultancy firm, first and foremost. So we'll sit with the client, try and understand their objectives. You know, what are they trying to achieve? Are they maybe just looking at becoming a global citizen, wanting just a travel document, for example, then a Caribbean passport, maybe a great idea, or looking at more of a settlement long-term option, potentially immigration, and then advising them on European options, Australian residents, Canadian residents, US. So we are able to assist clients with over 35 jurisdictions that offer residence and citizenship programs. And a new part to our business is this wonderful, exciting offer that's just been presented by Tess and John, you know, who have been specialists in this field for decades. And the two offerings tie very well together. As Tess touched on briefly, you know, it's great to give your kids the opportunity to go and study internationally. Of course, they're going to go on student visas if they don't have a second passport or residence. And what happens after they finish their studies? If it's purely a visa, they're going to have to go back home or look for other options at that stage. So what's really good is how our residence and citizenship ties in with the education is we can offer the families the option of getting residence in Europe. So the kids will then be able to go and study at one of the European universities, or UK citizenship, or, you know, US residence or citizenship at a reduced fee, first of all. And then, of course, when the studies come to an end, no question, they can stay on. They can stay on and work, they can stay on and live, they can study further. So it just gives so many options to families that are looking at, you know, potential immigration or just plan B options, just giving their kids options. And one of the biggest drivers of our business in the residence and citizenship side is children. Thank you, Fred.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank every single one of our attendees. As I said at the beginning, This was a record-breaking webinar for interest. I'm not surprised at all. And in fact, in true Africa style, we've had a whole bunch of late entrants as well. I'm getting ever so used to it. So new records have been set in the meantime. The first thing about education we learned today is that you need to educate yourself. And while I hope we've answered many questions to all our attendees, I know that there are many left unanswered. So apologies for that. However, how do we get around to answering those? And it's very simple. You get in contact. You put your hand up and you ask, and we answer. So on screen, you've got some contact details, and we're going to just freeze there for a moment. If you want to take them down or take a quick photo with your camera, please do so and get in contact. I think I'd like to, well, firstly, there's a lovely comment in the comments section, a question. I mentioned all the countries that have joined us, the width and breadth of Africa, except for a lady by the name of Auxilia, who mentioned that I've dialed in from Uganda and I didn't get a mention. So I'm really sorry, Auxilia. Uganda is here today as well. So thank you very much all to the rest of you as well. And as usual with Carrick seminars and webinars, you'll know that we make ourselves available and avail ourselves to you over the next 2-3 weeks to further the conversation. So yes, many of you have specifically been invited by our incredible advisors right across the continent. I suggest you get in contact with them directly as well. I want to thank Tess, John, and Lisa once again for spending the hour with us. I really appreciate you finding the time, and certainly hope to see you guys soon in a professional manner. So thank you very much. And
thank you, Fred. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.